The arbitrary threshold I have set has been crossed, and it is time, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this Placer AI webinar, Innovation in Retail Real Estate in 2023. Thank you so much for being here. I am very excited to be joined today by two amazing guests with whom I've had the pleasure of having an innovation conversation with before. So first, Jesse Michael, Senior Vice President, Digital Solutions at JLL. Jesse, thank you so much for joining.
Ethan, thanks for having me.
And Mickey Papillon, Vice President, Technology Strategy at Irvine Company. Mickey, thanks.
Ethan, happy to be here. Thank you very much.
I'm very excited for this because I really appreciate the perspectives that you both bring to the table. You know, when we've had these conversations in the past, it's always left me thinking. So hopefully we'll be able to provide some interesting ideas today. What we're going to do is do a very, very brief introduction to Placer for those of you who are unfamiliar. We're then going to talk about innovating for, so talking about some of the topics where innovation is trying to kind of is being led around, and then we are going to touch on some of the bigger narratives. And as always, we will leave some time for Q&A, but even better than leaving time for Q&A, if you have a question at any point throughout the conversation, please hit the Q&A button, either the top or bottom of your screen, depending on how you have Zoom configured, and we will try to get to it throughout the course of the conversation. So that quick introduction. Placer is a location data company. What that means, in the very simplest of terms, people vote with their feet. We're showing you how they vote across the country every single day to retail locations. We do that by observing a panel of tens of millions of devices and analyzing it with machine learning and AI algorithms. We then present all of this amazing data in a wealth of different reports within our platform on everything from customer demographics, true trade areas, the visitor journey, visits, and a whole lot more. And with that, it is time to dive into the topic at hand, innovation and what it means in this current environment. So let's start with kind of one of the topics du jour, which is the return to office, the return to work. And Mickey, I want to start with you here. When we think of how hybrid work has changed things, it has fundamentally created a new environment for the consumer, and that creates significant opportunities and challenges, especially within retail real estate. How do you adapt strategically when you see a change like this come?
So hybrid work means different things to different industries, and different workers have different opportunities to engage with our real estate. But when the approach for us, when we think about it, the approach is always about the retail customer, and it's the same as how it always has been. And we think about how to execute our initiatives in ways that are just really accelerated from what they used to be. So the customer at our shopping centers is the focus of that. And if you think about 8 a.m. on a Tuesday, if somebody's at a grocery store at that time and they are in the middle of the suburbs, that may be a different pattern for them than it was in the past. And so we have to adjust our thinking on how the shopping centers are interacting with the customers. If we want to add a service, again, that North Star is always whether or not it's going to enhance that experience for the customer. That may be directly like a loyalty program, that could be indirectly like a platform that expedites communication, whether it's to the consumer or to potentially the retailer themselves. But it always is that customer first approach. So, as the example on the screen shows, to gather the best information about the consumer behavior, it's always helpful to use the tools that are out there to look at directional trends over an extended period of time. You show here 2019 through 2023, and those trends can be as important or even more important than the absolute numbers themselves, because it helps you to make better decisions.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that always kind of really surprised us when we looked at this was kind of the balance of the week. Like if you think of when people were going to the office, and obviously this is an overgeneralization and there's lots of differences here, but that Monday, Friday dip speaks to this kind of like third period where we've always thought about kind of weekend, weekday, where now it's like weekend, weekday from the office and weekday from home. And what does that mean for like longer weekends, the ability to kind of go out to a restaurant a little bit earlier in the day on a Friday? Or I think there's so many ramifications to the increased flexibility given to the consumer.
Yeah, and if I were to take a look at just the focus that we've had over the years, it's always been on what can we do to push the overall traffic into that property? And it was in this kind of linear, more starting early in the week, and it kind of ramped up to the weekends. And that's changed dramatically over time. And so the adaptation, that we are now trying to make to this new normal is making sure that our businesses are there for the consumers when the consumer wants to be there, not when we think that they should be there. And again, this just goes back to looking at those trends. And if we can make decisions on what things should be happening based on when the people are there, that's going to be where it provides the best experience for them.
I think one thing to jump in there too, just to add on, I think the groups that are the real estate groups that are set up best for understanding sort of this migration pattern, like, yes, Placer's great. Obviously, you could see sort of the trend lines from 2019 to now. But one thing we try and stress with groups, especially now, is to have a CRM or loyalty, not necessarily loyalty, but at least CRM in place, or MarTech, to actually understand who those shoppers are. In a lot of cases in 2019, those systems or programs weren't necessarily set up to the point where they could actually see who's on site at which time and actually identify them. So that's one thing, they don't have the look back. But now one trend we're actually noticing a lot of is, because there is an adapting shopper to the times of when they're moving and the migration patterns, groups are having to put in sort of CRM programs at robust levels or robust scale to try and understand who those shoppers are and when they're visiting, and then understand those trend lines for themselves, just not at a macro level, but at a micro level.
Yeah, I love that point, especially on the kind of the CRM side, because one of the things we hear a lot from retailers is this idea of kind of being where the customer wants to be. But I think also part of it is explaining to the customer, or incentivizing the customer to do things that there is this win-win. So if I can have shoppers during an off-peak period, maybe it's a better experience for the customer, and it's something I can more effectively handle, as opposed to having rushes within my store at certain points. So I do think that ability to kind of take the data and use it to engage more effectively is such an important point. Another area that's kind of really caught our eye and has been of significant interest for us has been kind of the rise of like new retail formats, new types of retailers or tenants in the retail real estate mix, because as much as we call it retail real estate, it obviously goes much wider than that. How do you, and Mickey, I want to start with you again here. How do you analyze the potential of a tenant of a new format that is fundamentally new? Like, what's the process you go through?
So I started to allude to it in that previous question there, or that previous discussion, but it does come back to the fundamentals. And if you think about what we're here to do, it's all about traffic, and the traffic that you have at the property drives the sales, and those sales drive the rents. And so if you keep that as a kind of the guiding principle for how you make decisions, you're going to have the clarity to analyze new concepts. And that includes new and better ways of understanding your traffic. You're not just looking for the number of people anymore that are coming in. Long gone are the days of just a traditional people counter at the property, but we are looking for where they're coming from. We're looking for the times that they're coming, how long they're staying with us, and then you can get into more of some of the other types of really kind of nitty gritty of how the property ranks in your comp set, and how that specific tenant and that size of that tenant ranks among their comps and the units that they have within their brand. And so you then need to focus on the types of retailers that are going to best meet the expectations that your customers have, and what those demands that you have today. But then also move that customer expectation forward and take the ideas and concepts that you think are going to best resonate with them, that are better and different, and going to continue to push them. I'll use an analogy here for the benefit of my Canadian participant. It's, you want to skate towards where that puck is going, so to speak. You want to make sure that we're actually focused on where the customer's best experience is going to be in the future.
I mean, it's a fantastic point. I think it does lead to kind of nicely into like the next question, this idea of like kind of the changing customer. And I think, whether it's kind of movement to a different area, from the city to the suburbs, from the suburb to the city, that, we talked already about kind of where the work life shifts that have been made, the ways that people shop. I do think there's been a lot of changes to the customer in the last few years. Even something like we've been experienced with rising inflation, that changes the mentality that a customer has. I mean, ideal process for keeping your finger on the pulse of the customer? And Jesse, I'll start with you here. Like, how do you, there's so much change, so much volatility. How do you keep ahead of how the customer is interacting?
It's a pretty large question with so many different answers. I mean, trend lines and census data and everything else at a macro level, but going deeper, it's COVID fundamentally changed, obviously, where people went from a sprawl perspective, and you're seeing a lot of that change back because a lot of groups are calling, people back to office, et cetera. So there's, you're getting less sprawl and actually more condensed back into the city centers. But at least from a changing customer perspective, as I said before, there wasn't a lot of B2C technology in place previously from a lot of the retail groups or the retail real estate groups. So having sort of that back understanding of who their shoppers were, again, it wasn't understanding, it was Jesse coming to the shopping center for the most part. It was very at a high level who they were, and now again they're seeing this change in who the shoppers are and their purchasing power and the demographics, and in a lot of cases it's getting younger in sort of these suburban areas, and they do have a significant impact on the purchasing power piece because their household income is significantly higher. So that's what work from home has really done in that sense, and the ability to engage them is very different than it would have been even 5 years ago, where you may have an older demographic, an aging population potentially in those areas. And that changes sort of even how you incentivize them to come to the center or communicate with them to come to the center. You think about, Mickey brought up loyalty programs, that actually may resonate now in those, sort of tier 2, tier 3 centers, where you can actually communicate with them specific offers or specific platforms that they want to engage with, and albeit, online or through an app or whatever that may be. But that's at least at a high level, the changing customer. I go back to CRM as well. That's so important now in how you remarket or retarget customers after they visited, understanding the cross shop of where they go. That can obviously help identify the tenant mix as well, and what's lacking and what's missing for the changing customer.
I mean, Mickey, you touched on this when we were talking about kind of return to work, but what's the same thing for you? There's so much volatility, there's so much change. How do you stay ahead of kind of what the customer wants and how to best provide them with the ideal experience?
It's more important now than ever. And I think the experiences that we all have can be very helpful here in understanding what the customer is looking for, because that experience provides you with intuition, and that intuition gives you that ability to sniff test different things, and you can get through a lot very quickly with that. And so whether it's a new service that you're thinking about offering or a new concept that you're considering rolling out, you can really quickly figure out if that's going to be something that's good for your customers or not. Is it just something that's flashy or new, and it's just going to be a quick thing that might be interesting for a minute or not, and help to kind of vet things out that way. Also, you have to look at the feasibility. If you can actually roll something out, it might be a great idea, it might be a great type of initiative, but can you actually roll it out? Also, can you do that at scale? Is it just a one and done type of thing, or are you trying to do this across tens or hundreds or thousands of stores, brands, shopping centers, whatever it is? But the point is you don't just look at the benefits of what it is that's going to work, but you also have to look at the flip side of that, look at what failure looks like. That's going to give you, as much or more information about a platform or the possibility of integration as anything else. And you have to keep in mind that there's also that asymmetrical relationship when it comes to looking at downsides. And it's a lot easier, to kind of build if you're doing the right thing and like kind of continuing that thing versus doing something that fails. And so there's, it's fine if you have to cut bait with something and move on, but it's that's how you have to think about it, is look at what the pros are, what the cons are, and make sure you've got that full package of information when you're making those decisions.
I think it's such an important perspective. One of the areas where I think it kind of comes into play a lot is when you're thinking about retailers, tenants that are either kind of riding this high or are being short-term negatively impacted, not necessarily due to some huge fault in what they're bringing to the table because of some short-term misalignment with trends. How do you balance out retailers that are kind of either in this really strong wave or negative wave that you don't think is a long-term phenomenon when you're trying to make decisions about like tenancy. So there's some that are like, oh my God, this is the hottest thing right now, but is it going to be in a year from now? Versus there's one who's struggling more, but do we have confidence in its ability to recover? Like, how do you balance out the decision making when we have such kind of extremes in those who have seen these, again, think like Peloton mid pandemic, everyone's darling, and then maybe not as much, a year or so later, because of this kind of these waves and cycles.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, and it all comes down to having a plan. So if you start with just kind of the notion of being curious and look at different concepts or technologies or innovative things that you can potentially use to your benefit, and if there's going to be value there, look to take that to the next step. I love piloting things. Pilot a program if you can, or a tenant, and try it out in a space. And if there's a way to do it where perhaps it's a shorter term deal that potentially leads to something that's longer term, or put the economics in the deal in a way that help to incentivize both the growth and success of that tenant, not just on maximizing the rent, that can help you then to make that decision in the long term. And then test it quickly. If it's not working, that's okay. Going back to the last one, it's okay if it's not working out, but fail fast and move on, because failures can be valuable learning experiences as well. And then ultimately be okay with the outcome, because I think if we're looking at where the value is going to be, you're going to make you're going to take all the information that you have, you're going to make the best decision that you can, and there are going to be plenty of times when it just doesn't work out like you think it does, and that's totally okay. So you have to balance that need for that short term versus the long term with both a curious and strategic approach to it. And again, whether or not it's success, it doesn't matter. It'll help you learn for the future.
So if 2020 was Peloton, I guess 2023 is the pickleball craze, right? Everyone's throwing in pickleball courts all over the country, and it's an interesting thing, right? It's momentum, and this is what people are gravitating towards right now. But is it something that's going to have a long lasting, impact? Or in 2 or 3 years, are we going to look at this and go, wow, those pickleball courts aren't being used because the craze is gone and they've moved on to something else? I think of sort of activations in this way. I mean, I'm big on pop-ups, big on activations, innovative events, understanding sort of what we went back to demographics. If you're getting a younger demographic, obviously they're going to want something a little bit different from activation to draw them to the center. So it's being creative in what you're doing, but also maybe not gravitating towards the one hot button thing or the hot button topic of, like I said, pickleball, or you mentioned Peloton. That's sort of the big buzz, but trying different things. I know, Mickey, at one of your old assets, there was a dog park with basically a brewery sort of that was rotating in, or different taps and things like that. Like, that's super cool, especially if you're a new person to the area. Maybe you're single, but you have a dog. It's an ability to go and meet people. It's a meeting place. And we do some work with Inca centers in Europe, and they call them meeting places. They're not shopping malls or shopping centers. It really is meeting place. And I like the connotation behind that, because that's truly how you should be treating this. It's where people go to meet. And if I'm thinking about sort of things to, temporary changes or long-term decisions, you try, you innovate, as Mickey said, you pilot, but you pivot until you find something that sticks and then roll with that. But again, in 2-3 years, don't make it permanent necessarily, but try and make it more adaptable to the changing times as well.
I mean, I think that's an important point, and it kind of marries the two concepts together, because if you have this long-term vision of I'm trying to create a place where people are going to come and meet and spend time, it helps you drive that, okay, what's the short-term test I want to do? And if it works, great. If it doesn't, at least you understand the thesis that took you there, so that you know that, all right, why it didn't work out the way you would like it to. And now, shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk about some of the buzzier topics and that are, potentially overhyped in some cases, and we'll start with one that I have a tendency to get very excited about. And Jesse, I'll kick off with you on this one. How big of a deal is retail media for retail real estate? So specifically retail media within the brick and mortar environment. What do you think it brings to the table? How excited should we be?
it's probably one of the first industries that's been doing this for a long time. I don't know, Mickey, if you would agree, but you think about dough and just advertising in general at shopping centers, out of home and et cetera. I mean, it's been going on for, tens of years where, you can have banners inside of the center, or, just out of home, outside of the center, on the walls, et cetera. More and more digital screens and digital signage have made their way into centers. So I would say it's ahead of where the retail space is. I don't think it's overhyped. I think people are complicating it more than they need to in terms of the execution. If probably more so in the retail space, it's on that side of it, it's adding just another channel to your media mix. And in a lot of cases, people are freaking out, going, how we have these millions and millions of people entering, or thousands of people entering our store. And how do we engage with them? Well, social media showed up 10 years ago and you didn't know how to engage with them then. And you carved out a new budget and a new channel to engage with them. And there wasn't scale at that point. Your stores have scale, just like shopping centers already have scale, and you're already engaging with them through digital channels. I think what's missing from the retail media space and the shopping center side is just more of that connected journey and that connected customer of, and I've said this for a long time to others as well, where I walk into a center, let's say, with 4 walls, you walk in and you're on the first level, second level, third level. No one knows where I am throughout the center. You don't know if I've walked by an ad for Sephora or, Ulta or whatever it is, and then where I've gone from there. The ability to connect that full shopper journey from a retail media standpoint, if you're able to get past the impressionary view of retail media from a digital standpoint or out of home, that's to me where the value and the unlocker is going to be for shopping centers, because the traffic's there. There's tons of traffic. It's just how you're actually going to be able to monetize that and connect it to everything else you're doing. As I said, CRM, maybe you're doing loyalty, product discovery, and connecting it to that. To me, those are the big sort of opportunities, and no one's doing it. But they do have a leg up, I would say, in terms of the digital out of home that's already taking place in shopping centers.
And Mickey, is kind of a similar question for you, or at least a question on this same topic. I think so much of this is the idea of like the values beyond just sales that a shopping center provides, and one of them is visibility. What is the challenge of kind of, I guess, thinking more broadly around the power of the shopping center? What do you think needs to happen for us to kind of fully embrace all of the values that these physical spaces have?
Yeah, media is the most significant change in media is the shift from it being more of a static asset to one that's more dynamic. And that transformative aspect of it is really kind of then leads to all of the things that it's going to do. You're going to be able to potentially sell advertising not only to brands that you would traditionally, but you're also going to be able to connect with people, meaning customers, in different ways that provides a more personalized experience. And by having that more personalized and relevant advertising for them, that's going to improve that overall experience that they have. And it's going to feel more useful in the recommendations or the ads that you're seeing. And it's much less intrusive in that way. From a revenue perspective, obviously diversification of revenue, when it helps to augment or supplement the traditional rent structures that you have in a shopping center, and this could be for the owner and or the brand, it's depending on what we're talking about here. But it reduces that reliance solely on traditional sales, and it can also help to offset some of the challenges that you might find. You can set yourself apart or set yourself above by putting that media in place. One of the bigger things with the digital side of it is the data piece and getting those insights that you never used to. Just talked about impressions, talked about customer journey, and tying those pieces together. I think those are all very important. But then it also helps you to refine your marketing strategies. What are the things that people are actually looking for? Where are they spending time on? What are they viewing? What are they opening? That kind of thing. Also, how do you optimize a shopping center or a store layout in a way that makes more sense, whether that's through where the products are placed or where the individual brands are placed, and then also improve just the overall business, performance. And finally, just, again, talking more about, this competitive advantage, for a brand that is looking to differentiate themselves. They can have, a better impression on their customer base than potentially their competition. And they can also engage them in different ways And that kind of then trickles down to what that brand's exposure looks like then for the overall shopping center that they might be in, and provides for, again, that overall better experience for that customer.
And just to hop in there for one quick sec too, just on the data capture. I mean, first party data is all the rage as well too, and understanding that in a cookieless world, how shopping centers or meeting places or whatever we want to call them are capturing that first party data and understanding who those customers are. There's platforms out there to help you do that. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier about the foundation of your business. If you don't have anywhere to capture the data, to actually house the data, whether it's a CRM or however you're doing it, it's then harder to obviously communicate with that customer and connect it to a media network like Doe or anything in that sense. It goes back to sort of the foundationary piece, as I mentioned. We have a number of groups that run activations and events, and they have a sign up page, and people sign up, and that data is just lost into the ether, essentially. And that's a perfect place to start, from data capture and understanding who your customers are, all the way through to what Mickey was saying earlier. But once they enter, once they get to the asset, where they go from there, and then appending all of that data to that shopper. I mean, there's just so much missed in terms of the customer journey that that's another massive piece from retail media. A lot of people are jumping to the finish line versus getting the sort of foundational pieces in place, like CRM, just to house that data and actually properly append it to the shopper.
Very interesting. I think one of the areas that we've also seen like a lot of innovation, and I want to be clear, I think, I was thinking about this a lot last week. We even posted me about it on LinkedIn of innovation is very often technology enabled, but the ideas of innovation are not, it's not like, hey, a technology, it's a concept or something new we want to bring to the market. And I think one of the best examples of that is this kind of growing concept that we're seeing of kind of shopping center owners looking to maximize the space. And that could be retail media. It could be parking lots for EV charging. It could be kind of these back spaces for micro fulfillment. Mickey, I'll start with you here because you had got me really excited about the whole idea of EV charging the last time when we spoke. What do you think the biggest innovation happening in retail real estate is when it comes to trying to maximize space?
So, you mentioned it, and I think it was really well put, that the biggest innovations really all are surrounding the integration of the technology, but then also on the data analytics side as well. And so if you think about what the retail industry was like pre-March of 2020, and then what it was like over a period of a relatively short amount of time, where all of a sudden we saw this pivot and a speed at which we had really never seen before. We saw curbside pickup programs. We saw really the explosion of e-commerce. And I think more importantly, product discovery in a shopping journey for a customer, all of a sudden began to just start online for nearly every purchase that we were making. And we were all shopping online before COVID, but it was really all of a sudden now we need to find a thing, and this is how we're going to find that thing. And that is translated into kind of this differentiation of post-COVID and how we find our products. So moving forward, in talking about space, you're going to find a number of ways that technology is going to weave into retail. Some of them are going to be visible, some are going to be behind the scenes. We're going to include AI into this mix, of course, and we're going to look at smarter store designs and how we can potentially not necessarily make a store smaller, although in many cases that's what's going to happen, but you're going to look at it and have a more efficient store that's using the space differently. From a shopping experience, you talk about digital first in that product journey, and you're going to supplement that with augmented reality and virtual reality. And those experiences are going to offer something different for the customer. It's going to create an efficiency potentially, or it's going to be just something that overall boosts that experience, or we go with the experience thing again, but it's going to make it a different thing than just, again, parking, going in, buying the thing and then leaving. It's going to be a different, more immersive type of process. Also, you look at automation for inventory management and how that's going to change things. We're already seeing it with, you talk about micro fulfillment, and frankly, you've got primary fulfillment happening with some brands out of their retail locations, and that's just what they do. The stores are the inventory, and that's how they solve for direct shipping to customers. And then of course you've got personalization, for the customer, and multi-channels providing that seamless experience of helping to start in one place and then go and get it wherever they want it, whether that's physically going to the space and picking up the thing they're looking for, having it directly sent to them, or some sort of combination of the process where you've got different parties involved and the services that are out there. So there's a number of different ways that this is going to manifest itself, but it's really taking a look at how we're using the spaces in our physical retail in a very different way, because people still want to be there.
That's a great point. Jesse, same to you. What do you think the biggest kind of innovation is happening when we think about maximizing space?
I love that you went into sort of the AR VR side of it. I'm not as big on micro fulfillment. I think there's a cap on that. There's too many barriers around micro fulfillment for me that there's some groups that love to push sort of the micro fulfillment angle to it. I don't necessarily know that that's the way forward in my mind. Plus the retailer buy into that whole process, and in that case, they can't even get the inventory correct in their own stores, literally trying to pass off sort of fulfillment to another place and connect into their systems and yada yada. So that's not necessarily it for me, but I love the aspect of AR and VR around engaging the customer. To Mickey's point with EV, I know he's big on it. Back to the retail media piece that we were talking about, there's efficiencies there in connecting the customer journey. But in terms of that piece, like, I think he hit the nail on the head. I don't have too much to add, but other than there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of cleaning up sort of the common area space and making sure that people are engaging in that sense, and making sure that activations don't impede the way people shop and get in that sense, and overcrowding customers. I've seen one use case in that sense where I believe it was I think it was with Centennial, and it was an old Macy's or an old one of the stores that left, and they had this big format, obviously at one of the big anchor stores, and they put in 200, I believe it was 200 pop-ups or tiny little stores inside of the space, and created almost this little marketplace or this little market inside of that. To me, that's the best way to maximize space. Obviously, you would love to get a new anchor tenant to fill that in. But in the interim, if you can drive people to the asset and into that space with curiosity, it's almost like a little HomeSense or Winners type of format, right? Or TJX, where it's discovery. You're coming in and you're discovering potentially 200 new brands or 150 new brands in this space. That's really interesting to me. That other people could potentially copy with empty space before they try and obviously fill it with a longer term tenant.
Yeah, there's something about the idea that we keep on hearing a lot when we speak to folks about this recognition that sometimes the closure is an opportunity, and even before you filled it with something else, finding ways to utilize that space. But also, I think the point of kind of the idea of EV stations as here's an excuse to visit because it's something you can get done. So maybe that flips the coin between why you visit one center or another, allows you to stay a little bit longer, and then make that a place that you want to kind of spend time in. I think it's really an important element of recognizing that all of this space that you're given can be used to generate excitement and interest for the kind of the visitor and for the kind of the customer. I want to talk about something we called kind of make sense innovation, which is things that are a kind of the next step forward, but not like, oh my God, I'm going to have a robot come and clean my car and then deliver your pizza afterwards. And I think maybe the greatest example of us was like, BOPUS and being this huge asset during the pandemic that kind of changed the way many of us shopped. And it's like, it's nothing crazy. It's not like, oh my God, I never would have thought of this idea. It's just kind of a makes sense innovation. And I think a lot of it comes in multi-channel or omnichannel. So Jesse, I'll start with you here. How do you see omnichannel approaches or multi-channel or harmonized retail approaches, whatever you want to call it, better leveraging stores moving forward?
I think it starts, and I've said this to other, Mickey and I have had this conversation too. And I've probably said it 5 or 6 times on this call already, but I go back to foundation. Everyone, when you're building a house, I said this in our ICSC panel too, when you're building a house, it starts with the foundation and you build upwards from there. A lot of cases in the retail real estate world, this isn't necessarily an issue with them, but it's more of an issue with the retail side or the retailer or the tenant not having their own house in order in terms of, Mickey brought up inventory earlier and doing in-store fulfillment. In-store inventory still is a mess. And in that case, that's one of the first things to me that needs to be shored up is the technology on that side. You have Lululemon on one end, who's doing a fantastic job with RFID and actually understanding the product that's in store. And when something's purchased, it's, reduced right away. Their own in-store staff utilizes the online, the website inventory that they pull up on the tablet that they use in their hand. I don't know if there's another store that actually trusts that mechanism enough to do that because it's not accurate. And to me, it's hard to do sort of more of this buy online, pick up in store with the retail real estate or the real estate's involvement, the real estate group's involvement in that. Whether it's, doing product discovery or e-commerce online as the real estate owner, it's difficult to do that order fulfillment without some sort of third party that's getting in the way to help understand or curate or understand what that inventory is and if it's actually there. So I don't know if that's an answer really from why the panelists are here, but to me, it starts with the retailer side or the tenant side that needs to really shore up their end of the bargain before the retail real estate groups can actually truly get involved and dive in deep. But I don't know, Mickey, if you share sort of that same feedback.
Yeah, and as the property owner, we have one goal, and that is to support our retailers and their business. And that is what all of this surrounds. And so as you think about this rapid change that they're experiencing or they have experienced and they continue to experience, the right approach is going to change as well. And so from the store side, you've got more of a seamless experience and omni-channel really to help leverage that overall customer, from the point where they are looking for the product to the point where it's in their hands or in their home. There's a different journey that goes through that. And so that is, you bring up a great point of it starts with the brand, starts with the retailer in store, in the inventory accuracy that's there. We have to make sure that we know what's in those stores so that it can be fulfilled, to the customer, that when the customer wants it. Shipping is also a big thing, and it kind of goes a little counterintuitive to physical retail, but also this goes back into the let's figure out what the customer is looking for. And sometimes they want to see it, feel it, touch it, and have it right away. Sometimes they need it, but they don't need it right away, and it's more convenient to get it shipped to them. The same goes on the flip side of that. How about returns? How are we addressing returns and what happens there? This is, continues to be an Achilles heel for companies where you've got high rates of returns, especially with items that are bought digitally. And so that's something that still needs some work and some innovation, frankly, around how we deal with that. Also, we talk about BOPUS and also the return side of it, but what about just this idea of an endless aisle in the store and tying when you're in the physical space, then out to basically whatever it is that you're looking for, pretty much across the entirety of all the SKUs that brand can offer. And then as you want to leave, then how about the self-checkout or autonomous checkout process? Some good examples of that are out there right now with Amazon and others, but making that process a little bit easier as well. And I don't think we can also not mention kind of what sustainability is going to mean for us. And I don't mean in the traditional sense, but more about how we are reusing the products that we have in the retail side and how we make it so that we're having a less impact, on the overall process. And so we're not talking about as much, going into waste as we are about recycling and also buying more local. So we're looking at different types of ways to help support those endeavors. And these are important things, not just because they're going to be helpful in reducing carbon emissions and all of that, but because it's what the consumer is looking for. There's a value system, an intrinsic sense that this is the brand or the product that I want to align myself with. And so this circular economy concept is really taking hold, especially in certain cohorts. And I think it's important that we make sure that we're taking that into account as well as we think about innovation and the things that we're doing.
I mean, really important points, but I think now we get to talk about the topic that I think you're banned from having a conversation about anything related to innovation in retail unless you touch on this topic. But here the devil is in the details. So I do want to kind of frame it. The metaverse. let's limit it to just the next decade. So 2033 and forward, not when we're all kind of living in headsets for beyond that. How big of an impact do you think the metaverse makes in the next decade? Mickey, let's start with you.
So the idea of the metaverse is something that you could ask 10 people for their explanation and you're going to hear 10 different answers. I've done it. I've been in a room where that happens and everyone thinks about it a little bit differently. But this idea of the headset and going into VR might be more of a proof of concept in many ways than what the consumer is going to use, and especially when it relates to this industry, how it's going to be integrated. But we need to look at the Web 3.0 concepts and really talk about how AR is going to fit itself into the physical shopping experience, how VR is going to as well, and not in the and there will be some brands that will embrace it and will do a lot with it, and there'll be others that will be very just dipping toes into it and not doing much with it. Then there's the pieces of both cryptocurrency and NFTs. We just heard yesterday that PayPal is now going to be, they just launched their first cryptocurrency, and which is based on stablecoin, and this could potentially be something that changes how we think about it, where it's not as volatile as it has been in the past, and we're now focused on crypto as a legitimized form of currency. And I'm not saying PayPal is going to change the world, but it was a step that was pretty interesting that they were taking it down that route. Also, if you look at what the retailer is going to do, there's going to be technological advancements that happen, but unless there's adoption, it almost doesn't matter. And on the same side of that coin, what's happening with consumer adoption? If the retailer is adopting it, the store is adopting it, but the consumer isn't, it doesn't matter then either. And so it's going to be all of those pieces coming together, the ability of not only the technologies to advance to a point where they're affordable and scalable, the retailer is going to need to have the interest in adopting it, the consumer is going to want to use it, and you put all of those pieces together, and then you can start to craft the strategies that are going to help to create, again, that better shopping experience for the customer.
A very diplomatic answer. Jesse, your take, the metaverse in the next decade.
Yeah, I'll try and be as diplomatic as possible as well. But I think, anyone I've spoken to knows sort of my position on this. I've said it publicly as well. I agree with Mickey. He and I have had a lot of conversations around this, around the real estate or retail real estate group's role in this and supporting retailers. It does need to be a retailer driven initiative from my perspective in terms of the metaverse specifically. We've seen them try and, some tenants or some groups some retailers try and actually build their own environments. And unless you're building at Roblox, inside of Roblox right now, I forget the numbers offhand, but they have over, I think it's 40 million daily actives, as of a couple of months ago. That's extremely strong numbers if you think about sort of where the consumer is. And I think in the next 10 years, if we're looking 10 years down, for sure, there's going to be an adoption of that with younger consumers. So there needs to be a consideration of it. I like Mickey's point around Web3 and how you actually integrate these types of strategies into loyalty. We've seen a couple of technology groups and spoken to a number of them that have an integration into Wallet, Apple Wallet and other things along with directly and building out loyalty inside of Web3 and getting away from sort of the traditional app build and actually integrating offers into more natural environment built right into the wallet or right into your phone. There's different I guess technologies in this sense that to me make a lot more sense of the next 10 years than building an environment in the metaverse and trying to push shoppers towards that when you've got these massive assets, physical assets sitting out there in the real world that you need to focus on getting shoppers to, and a lot of innovation around that. So I think there's something there, obviously, with Roblox adoption that continuing to gain steam. But I don't see anything in the next 10 years, but look at Web3 or something along those lines to sort of take off in the loyalty space.
Great point. And we got a great question that came in. It said, technology and innovation are terrific. What's happened to the role of the salesperson on the floor who actually interacts with the customers seems to have been minimized by many retailers. And I want to use that as my segue to get to the last question. And we are at time, so we're going to do this one quick. But it's, what is your favorite innovation, or what is the major retail real estate innovation you think we missed I agree with the question. I think it's empowering frontline workers, understanding in inventory, information that can help them get products to the customer when it's not in stock, helping them with returns. I think that's the biggest thing that could happen within the retail environment. Mickey, let's start with you. Jesse, we'll end with you. What's the thing we missed or your favorite?
Yeah, and just to acknowledge it, it is a point well taken and point well put, frankly, because it is something that is missing. Today it seems more than what we had, 3+ years ago. But I'll give you two quick ones here for I think what is missing, and the first one is connectivity. All of these experiences that are based around and supported by technology are going to need enhanced connectivity. And it's not enough to just say we've got a Wi-Fi system at our property and so people can log on to that. It's all about what the mobile device is going and how that experience, again, going back to that journey where it starts on mobile and it continues on through your shopping center or into your store. And so you've got to make sure that you've got good connectivity, strong 5G connectivity within those spaces, because that's the primary way that most customers are going to be experiencing our digital assets. And we need low latencies and those types of things to make sure that that those experiences are the best that they can be. And then you brought it up, and I was saving it for now, but when you really look at the electrification of mobility, this is a big thing that is still missing. And I think if you're outside of California or outside of certain parts of Europe, you don't truly appreciate where this is going. The state of California in the second quarter just passed over 25% of all new vehicle registrations are now electric. In certain parts of it, especially in Southern California, that number is over 40%. In parts of Europe, that number is over 90%. And so the person who is coming to your property is more likely going to have an EV in an ever increasing manner than they have in the future or in the past. And in the future, people are going to want to fuel up those EVs, and fuel should be air quoted here. But it's all about creating what that kind of dual purpose trip can do for them. Not everybody has a place to charge at their home or at their office, although that's where we're going to see the majority of the charging sessions that occur. But for those that can't, or for those that are going to or from somewhere, or just want to top up in the middle of the day, if you can create that space for them at the shopping center, where you've got a highly amenitized space where the customer can stop for between 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, depending on the type of infrastructure that you put in, you can really modify the customer's journey to come to your space and create additional value for your space, because they can then say, I can do two things at once. I can go to the grocery store and charge. I can go to the gym and charge, go get my lunch and charge, those types of things. And that's I think something that is going to continue to evolve as we go. No one's really done it perfectly yet, but we're starting to see some good models of how that experience can be as pretty great.
Yeah, excellent. Jesse, real quick, what's the one we missed, your favorite?
I'm going to go a bit over time. Sorry. So probably three really, really fast. I think Gen AI is something that we missed talking about in generative AI around sort of the customer support piece. There are a lot of groups, a lot of retail or real estate groups with retail holdings that are eliminating customer support or have eliminated customer support inside of the mall or the meeting place. How you are replacing that is really, really important. And whether it's screens or, supporting customers somehow as they enter, and generative AI can play a role in that. Same with in-store, to touch on that person's question around in-store support. We're working with a group, with a technology group on our retail advisory team that has an in-store capability where you can scan a QR code and you're actually taken to, let's say you're in Home Depot and you're taken to a professional builder in that sense, and they're employed by Home Depot, and they can actually engage with that person to help you navigate. Say you're building a deck, and they can help you navigate and get those pieces that you're looking to build. So there's pieces in the technology space that'll help. I think Gen AI will be there. The last thing, my favorite thing, and one thing that's missing, is there's a lot of groups that have technology in place in different pieces, but they're not connecting it together. So to me, the biggest thing in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, I would love to see someone take the bull by the horns and connect everything they're doing and just say, we've got retail media with digital out of home and other components inside of our centers. We've got product discovery or loyalty or CRM and all of these things, but they're not communicating together. I would love to see someone take all of the retail tech that they've implemented and actually stitch it together and start understanding the customer better, even to activations and things along that sense. It's missing right now. I don't think I can name one that I've heard that's doing it extremely well or well at all. The pieces are there, the building blocks are there, but no one's actually stitched it together. So I would love to see that come together in the next couple of years.
Great answer. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Apologies for running a little bit over time, but it was an amazing conversation. So we had to continue with it. But thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Mickey, both so much for being here, for sharing your insights and your expertise. Appreciate it so much. And it was such a joy for me, at least. And I'm sure for everyone who was listening. Please stay tuned. Things will be a little bit quiet for the rest of August, but we will be back in early September with our next webinar. It will be focused on the mall sector. So please join us for that. Thank you so much for being here today. Mickey and Jesse, thank you both so much for joining.